Phenomenology. Traditionally, our formal study of philosophy begins with logic, metaphysics, cosmology, and finally, philosophy of man. All these are definitions of man. Notice how each of them cut down man into parts and look on from an external view. Instead of going through the traditional approach beginning with logic, we shall begin with a different approach that deals with things in their totality. Today I'll be talking about Phenomenology. Let us begin by talking about the history of Phenomenology. The phenomenological movement began with a mathematician turned philosopher named Edmund Husserl. His aim was to arrive at philosophy as a rigorous science. By a rigorous science, he wanted a philosophy that contained the least number of primary presuppositions. His aim was similar to Descartes, although unlike Descartes, Husserl was dissatisfied with the sciences of his time, in particular, the naturalistic psychology of his time, which presupposes that man is a mechanistic animal. Edmund Husserl was keenly against what he calls the natural attitude. It is also known as a scientific attitude. It observes things, expresses their workings in singular judgments, then in universal judgments, and by the process of induction-deduction, arrive at concrete results. This is how the sciences usually operate. For Husserl, this method assumes that there is no need to ask how we know. It assumes that the world is out there, and it takes for granted the world totality. The natural attitude looks at reality as things. There is no mystery. The world becomes a fact world. And so began Phenomenology, attempting to go back to the phenomenon, to that which presents itself to man, seeing things as they really are, independent of any prejudice. Now let us move on to some characteristics of the phenomenological method. First, it's mostly positing the unity first, the whole, before analyzing the parts or aspects of this unity. The phenomenologist does not use induction and deduction. The phenomenologist is essentially concerned about experience and about man. The phenomenologist uses epoche, a stepping from prejudice, a suspension of judgment, a bracketing of the natural attitude. Moving on, we have the 3 steps of Husserl's phenomenological method. First step is using epoche, wherein it suspends one's judgment first towards the object that is being investigated. The second step is the phenomenological eidetic reduction, wherein reducing the experience to its essence. And the third, the phenomenological transcendental reduction, reducing the object to the very activity itself of one's consciousness. The individual becomes conscious of the subject. With that, here's an example of the phenomenological method in use. Let's say how I perceive a love interest. I would see them as a rather beautiful and worthy person of my preferences. To begin with, I first have to use epoche. I'll have to suspend my natural attitude towards the love interest. I am biased towards the love interest because of my own delusions about them. Next, I would have to view that person as they really are using the phenomenological eidetic reduction. Absent of my prejudice, I would investigate what makes that person them and different from other people. Finally, I will use the phenomenological transcendental reduction. From my investigation of the person for who they really are, I reduce it to the experience I had with that person. I become conscious of that person, of my experiences with them. Finally, we have the intentionality of consciousness that Husserl came up with from the phenomenological transcendental reduction. This is actually the main insight of phenomenology. For Husserl, every conscious act intends something. The character of the object is co-determined by the character of the act. For the phenomenologist, there is no object without a subject, and no subject without an object. The subject of the object is called noesis, while the object for the subject is called noema. The world is a human world, and man is a being in the world. Today we talk about man as a whole, the history of phenomenology, the natural attitude, some characteristics of the phenomenological method, Husserl's steps in the phenomenological method, and his intentionality of consciousness. Until next time, and thanks for watching.